As the galaxy braces for the inevitable onslaught of the Devourers, a small band of survivors, led by an unlikely hero, a former track scientist who had a hand in creating the Devourers, unravels a devastating truth. The Devourers' insatiable hunger is not just physical, but existential. They are not merely consuming power. They are consuming the very fabric of the universe itself. With every planet they devour, every star they drain, the universe grows weaker. And in the end, they will consume it all, leaving nothing but an endless void. In a final, desperate bid to stop the Devourers, the survivors discover that the key to ending their hunger lies within the very energy source that birthed them, the Track-S failed experiment. But the cost is unimaginable. To destroy the Devourers, they must sacrifice themselves, unleashing a cataclysmic force that will destroy the Devourers and potentially unravel the fabric of space-time itself. As the final confrontation looms, the survivors are forced to make a choice. Stop the Devourers and save the universe, or let the hunger continue, knowing that their actions may only delay the inevitable. The Devourers, driven by an endless need to consume, are on the verge of consuming everything, and only one question remains. Will anyone be left to stop them? With the galaxy teetering on the edge of oblivion, the survivors make their final stand, knowing that their sacrifice will be the only way to break the Devourers' unending cycle of hunger. Or perhaps, their own demise is just another meal for the all-consuming void at sea. Humans were initially perceived as a peaceful, weak species by the Galactic Federation and its member species. The Galactic Federation, which monitors the aggression levels of various species across the galaxy, had placed humans very low on the aggression index, ranking them a mere 2 out of 16. This ranking signified that humans were not considered a threat in terms of military power or aggressive tendencies. The Federation Species Registry recorded humans as docile and non-confrontational, with little to no interest in warfare. The low aggression rating stemmed from several key historical and behavioral traits exhibited by humans. For one, they had not fought any significant wars among themselves for centuries, which was remarkable considering the nature of most other galactic species. Internal conflicts, when they did arise, were resolved through diplomacy, negotiations, and compromise rather than violence. Humans had formed a unified world government before even mastering faster-than-light travel, a feat that other species viewed as a sign of cooperation and peace rather than conquest or domination. Moreover, humans were seen as a species that preferred to resolve conflicts with other civilizations through peaceful means, rather than resorting to force. This was evident in their interactions with other galactic species. For example, when the Xenic, an expansionist species, claimed a human mining colony as their own, the Federation expected the humans to defend their territory aggressively. However, the humans shocked the Federation by agreeing to surrender the colony for a small yearly fee, avoiding conflict altogether. Similarly, when the paranoid Hodul arrested human ambassadors on false charges of espionage, the humans did not retaliate with force. Instead, they used diplomatic backchannels to negotiate a prisoner exchange, further reinforcing the perception of humans as a species that would rather avoid confrontation than escalate tensions. This pacifist reputation, while commendable to some, led others to question whether humans could defend themselves effectively or stand up to more aggressive species if the need arose. While the Federation admired humanity's diplomatic approach, there were many who saw it as a weakness, assuming that humans avoided war not because they preferred peace, but because they were unable to fight effectively. This perception would soon be shattered when the true capabilities of humanity were revealed in the face of the Devourer threat. Humans' behavior in the context of first contact and conflict stood in stark contrast to that of many other galactic species. Unlike species that had often approached initial encounters with new civilizations through hostility or suspicion, humans were unusually open and eager to engage in peaceful relations. This cooperative and diplomatic response was one of the first signs that humans might not fit the Federation's assumptions of being merely a peaceful, weak species. When humanity made first contact with other species, they did not respond with aggression or fear. Instead, they demonstrated a willingness to engage in open dialogue, to listen, and to learn from those they encountered. This approach was different from the typical reaction seen in the wider galaxy. Many species, especially the more aggressive ones, were quick to see other civilizations as threats, or at the very least, competitors for resources and territory. But humans had already demonstrated that they valued diplomacy and negotiation over combat. The Federation had observed this trend from the moment humans were inducted as members. Their history of resolving internal conflicts without bloodshed, through negotiation and compromise rather than violence, stood as a testament to their belief in peaceful solutions. For example, when the Xenic, a more expansionist species, laid claim to a human-controlled mining colony, the Federation expected the humans to react with military force. Given the nature of the Xenic and their aggressive expansionist policies, it was logical to assume that the humans would defend their colony at all costs. Instead, the humans surprised everyone by agreeing to simply hand over the colony to the Xenic in exchange for a small annual fee. Rather than risking war, they negotiated a peaceful settlement that benefited both parties. The outcome was one where the humans avoided unnecessary conflict and maintained their peace, even though they lost territory. Similarly, when the Hodul, a paranoid and militaristic species, accused the human diplomats of espionage, the situation could have escalated into an intergalactic incident. The Hodul had no evidence to support their accusations, and yet they detained and imprisoned the human ambassadors. Many other species in the Federation would have seen this as a provocation, and war would have been considered a legitimate response. However, the humans took a different approach. Instead of retaliating with military action or force, they opened back-channel negotiations with the Hodul. They arranged a prisoner exchange, offering a few smugglers in return for their detained diplomats. In doing so, the humans showed their commitment to resolving issues through peaceful means, even when provoked. This tendency to prioritize diplomacy over warfare reinforced the perception that humans were a species unwilling or unable to fight. To many within the Federation, their consistent reluctance to engage in combat was a sign of weakness. They viewed the humans' peaceful responses to conflict as a refusal to take responsibility for their own security or as a lack of the necessary strength to defend themselves. However, these interactions were more indicative of humans' preference for resolution through understanding and cooperation, rather than an inability to defend themselves if necessary. The Federation's dismissal of humanity as weak and non-threatening was based largely on their observed responses to minor conflicts. But this view would soon be tested and drastically changed when the humans' true military capabilities were revealed in the face of the Devourer threat. The humans' reluctance to engage in war wasn't because they lacked the ability to do so, but rather because they preferred to avoid conflict when possible, understanding the devastating consequences that war could bring. This fundamental aspect of human nature, which balanced the desire for peace with the potential for overwhelming force, would soon alter the Federation's perception of them forever. The Federation's perception of humanity was heavily influenced by their consistently peaceful approach to conflict. Over time, this image of humanity as a non-aggressive, diplomatically oriented species led many in the Federation to label them as weak or lacking in the ability to engage in warfare. To the other galactic species, humans were seen as pacifists who preferred negotiation over confrontation, and their history appeared to support this idea. However, this view of humanity was based on a shallow understanding of human nature and ignored the deeper, more dangerous capabilities that humans possessed. The humans' reluctance to engage in warfare was often interpreted as a sign of impotence. When it came to territorial disputes or diplomatic tensions, the Federation saw humanity as a species that, rather than standing up for their interests, chose to retreat or settle matters through compromise. The decision to allow the Xenic to take over a human mining colony for a modest fee was viewed as an act of weakness, an unwillingness to fight for what was theirs. Similarly, when their diplomats were imprisoned by the Hodul, the Federation assumed that the humans' decision to handle the situation diplomatically instead of retaliating meant that they lacked the resolve or the means to defend their honor. This perception was widely held within the Federation, particularly by the more militaristic species, who looked at the humans' avoidance of conflict as proof that they were not prepared to deal with the aggressive challenges of galactic life. Some saw this pacifism as a virtue, appreciating the humans' commitment to diplomacy, while others thought it showed an inherent fragility in their character, suggesting they lacked the toughness to survive in a galaxy full of violent and ambitious species. For these skeptics, the Federation's peaceful policies were a naivety at best and a strategic mistake at worst. To them, it was a matter of time before humans would be taken advantage of or wiped out by a more aggressive species that didn't share their values of peace and compromise. This view reached its peak during the conflict with the Devourers, a mysterious and hostile force that appeared to be beyond the capabilities of the Federation's finest military units. The Federation had assumed that humanity, given its perceived weakness and peaceful disposition, would be of no help in this dire situation. So, when the Federation's fleet was decimated by the Devourers, the Federation's military leaders were left in despair. They expected humanity, just as they had before, to retreat, to avoid further escalation, or to seek peace at all costs. What the Federation didn't anticipate was that, in the face of overwhelming adversity, the humans would not back down. Instead, they surprised everyone by coming to the Federation's aid, sending 5 ships to engage the enemy, despite knowing full well that they would likely face an unstoppable foe. At first, it seemed like a futile gesture, an ill-fated attempt to assist in a hopeless situation. But the humans weren't coming to simply hold the line or protect themselves. They had a plan, and a weapon, that would change everything. When the Terran ships arrived and the human commander, Michael Aroef, revealed that they had developed a weapon capable of annihilating the Devourers with a single strike, the Federation's assumptions about human weakness were shattered. The weapon they unleashed was a devastating nanite bomb, an invention that could disintegrate entire fleets and dismantle matter on a molecular level. The sheer power of the weapon was beyond anything the Federation had imagined, and it caused devastation on a scale that was previously inconceivable. The Devourers, a species that had been feared across the galaxy for their ability to consume entire star systems, were wiped out in a single moment. The bomb was a clear demonstration of the terrifying power that humanity had been keeping hidden. It was an unsettling revelation for the Federation, particularly for those who had believed that the humans were nothing more than diplomatic weaklings. The explosion not only obliterated the Devourer fleet, but also created a ripple of destruction that left the Federation stunned. What had seemed like a peaceful and docile species was now revealed to have the ability to destroy entire civilizations with ease. The human response to the crisis turned the Federation's perception of humanity on its head. The notion that humans were incapable of fighting wars or wielding destructive force was proven utterly false. The revelation that the humans had not only developed such a weapon, but had held it in reserve, choosing not to use it until absolutely necessary, demonstrated a level of self-control and strategic thinking that few species could match. In that moment, the Federation realized they had misjudged humanity, and the species they once considered weak and passive was revealed to be far more formidable than they could have ever imagined. In the aftermath of the battle, many in the Federation struggled to reconcile this new reality with their previous understanding of humanity. Some saw the humans' willingness to wield such power as evidence of their dangerous potential. Others realized that the humans had chosen peace not because they could not fight, but because they understood the true cost of violence and the responsibility that came with possessing such destructive capabilities. This revelation reshaped the Federation's relationship with humanity and forced a re-evaluation of how they viewed human nature and the true extent of their power. When the humans entered the conflict with the Devourers, they did not come as a mere addition to the Federation's already beleaguered forces. Instead, they entered the battle with a weapon that would forever change the Federation's view of them. The weapon they deployed, a nanite bomb, was not just an advanced piece of technology, but an embodiment of the terrifying potential humanity had kept hidden from the galaxy for centuries. This was the moment that revealed humanity's true strength, an unforeseen power that had been concealed behind their peaceful image. The Federation, and the other galactic species had long assumed that humanity was a peaceful species that avoided conflict at all costs. Their track record supported this assumption, from territorial disputes where they prefer negotiation over confrontation, to diplomatic crises where they opted for talks instead of military action. Humanity's image was that of a species that avoided war, even when it would have been justified, and this led to the Federation classifying them as one of the least aggressive species in the galaxy. However, when the Devourers, a terrifying and unknown threat that consumed entire star systems, began their invasion, the Federation's military forces quickly realized that they were no match for the enemy. The Devourers' ships were technologically superior, their weapons devastating, and the Federation's finest fleet suffered heavy losses in their attempts to fight back. In this dire situation, the Federation sent out a distress signal, hoping for reinforcements from any of the galactic species, except humanity. The expectation was that the humans would continue their history of avoiding war and remain neutral or retreat, leaving the Federation to deal with the oncoming storm alone. To the Federation's shock, humanity responded, but not with mere diplomacy or an offer of peace talks. Instead, humanity arrived with 5 ships and a weapon so powerful that it would not only change the course of the battle, but also force the Federation to reassess everything they had previously believed about humans. The weapon in question was a nanite bomb, an invention that had never been used in real combat before. The bomb was capable of destroying entire fleets, annihilating anything in its blast radius, and even dismantling matter at a molecular level. It was a weapon of unparalleled destructive capability, one that the Federation had never imagined humanity could possess, let alone develop. When the human commander Michael Aroef explained the nature of the weapon, it sounded almost casual, as if it were just another tool in their arsenal. He described the bomb's potential, detailing how it could eliminate the Devourer fleet with a single missile. The Federation, still operating under the belief that humans were too pacifistic to fight, could hardly comprehend what they were hearing. The very idea that humans had developed such a weapon, and had kept it hidden until now, was staggering. It was a clear demonstration that humanity's peaceful image had been a carefully crafted illusion, one that masked the true extent of their power. The human fleet fired the missile, and the results were catastrophic. At first, the missile seemed to miss its target, but the reality was far more destructive. The explosion that followed was so powerful that it sent shockwaves through space, completely vaporizing a third of the Devourer fleet in an instant. The energy released was so intense that the Federation sensors could barely register the scale of the destruction. What was left of the Devourer fleet, though further out from the explosion's core, was not spared either. The bomb released a swarm of nanobots that began dismantling the ships on a molecular level, disintegrating their structure piece by piece until nothing was left. The scale of the devastation was unlike anything the Federation had ever witnessed. The Devourers, who had once seemed invincible and unstoppable, were reduced to nothing. What had been a fleet of terrifyingly advanced ships and a highly aggressive species was now reduced to dust and debris. The Federation's military officers, who had been convinced that they were facing an unstoppable force, were left in stunned silence as they watched the destruction unfold. What was even more unnerving was the realization that the humans had done this with a single missile. This wasn't a prolonged battle or a slow victory. This was the kind of annihilation that would take most species' entire armadas, years of preparation, and the most advanced technologies to even begin to achieve. The aftermath of the explosion left the Federation grappling with the consequences of their misjudgment. For centuries, humanity had been perceived as weak, even cowardly, because they avoided conflict. But what they had just witnessed was a species capable of producing weapons of such unimaginable power that it made the Federation reconsider everything they had believed about human nature. The true horror lay not just in the destructive power of the weapon, but in the realization that humanity had chosen to keep it in reserve, avoiding its use until the stakes were at their highest. This moment of revelation also raised deep concerns within the Federation. The idea that a species so skilled in diplomacy and conflict resolution could have such a devastating weapon at their disposal created a sense of fear. If humanity could wipe out an entire fleet in a matter of seconds, what would happen if they ever decided to turn this weapon on the Federation itself? What if their self-restraint, the very thing that had made them seem weak and docile, suddenly vanished? The Federation realized that it was not a lack of ability that had kept humanity from engaging in conflict, but rather their careful control over their power. The Federation's understanding of humanity was shattered. The species they had once labeled as weak was now understood to be a potential existential threat, a species with the capacity to destroy whole fleets and possibly entire civilizations, with little more than a thought. This revelation forced a major shift in the Federation's stance towards humanity. What was once seen as a mere diplomatic partner, an easy species to negotiate with and exploit for trade, was now viewed with a mix of awe and terror. Humanity's true potential, for better or worse, had been revealed, and it would forever change the way the galaxy viewed them. In the end, the human intervention in the war against the Devourers not only secured the survival of the Federation, but also forced the entire galaxy to confront a difficult truth. Humanity's peaceful nature was not a sign of weakness, but a deliberate choice. And that choice, when pushed to its limits, had proven to be one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy. The Federation would never look at humanity the same way again, and the memory of the devastating power the humans had unleashed would linger in their minds forever. The Devourers, a name that would forever be etched into the annals of galactic history, were not merely an enemy. They were a force of nature, described as a species with a singular, terrifying goal: to consume and assimilate everything in their path. They posed an existential threat to all life in the galaxy. Their very existence was predicated on destruction, and their methods of war were as brutal as they were effective. This was the enemy the Federation had underestimated, and it was humanity's intervention that saved them from complete annihilation. The Devourers' origins were shrouded in mystery. Little was known about where they came from or how they had evolved. What was certain, however, was that they were relentless in their pursuit of domination. They traveled through space in enormous, biomechanical ships, which resembled massive predatory creatures rather than traditional vessels. These ships, known as harbingers, were capable of withstanding unimaginable amounts of damage, making them nearly invulnerable to conventional weaponry. What set them apart from other species, however, was not just their ships, but the way they fought. Their entire civilization was built around consuming resources, biological, technological, and even entire star systems. When the Devourers arrived in Federation space, they brought with them a strategy that was as chilling as it was efficient. Unlike many other species who fought for territorial gain, political power, or even revenge, the Devourers' sole aim was annihilation. Their method was simple. They would arrive in a system, consume all the planets, life forms, and resources within it, and then move on to the next. Every living being, every piece of technology, everything was absorbed into their hive-like network, which grew larger and more dangerous as it spread across the galaxy. It was an unending process of consumption that left nothing in its wake except empty voids where once thriving civilizations had been. The Federation, initially unprepared for such a dire threat, quickly found itself unable to respond to the Devourer onslaught. They were accustomed to battling other galactic species over territorial disputes, economic dominance, or ideological differences, but the Devourers presented a unique challenge. They were not interested in negotiation, diplomacy, or any form of settlement. They were intent on devouring everything, be it planets, star systems, or entire fleets of military ships. The Devourers' tactics were so overwhelming that even the Federation's most powerful warships were incapable of stopping them. The Federation's fleets tried everything from massive bombardments to deploying advanced shields and countermeasures, but nothing seemed to work. The Devourers' ships were equipped with advanced weaponry that seemed to bypass conventional defenses. Their primary weapon was a highly destructive energy beam that could break apart entire planets, turning them into massive debris fields. However, what made them truly terrifying was their ability to consume technology and adapt it. Each Devourer fleet had a distinct ability to evolve and incorporate whatever it consumed into its own systems. If they encountered a Federation ship, they would rapidly adapt its weapons and shields, integrating them into their own technology. In a matter of hours, a Devourer ship could be using Federation technology against them, often in more effective ways than the original creators could. Moreover, the Devourers didn't just fight like a traditional army. They were a singular hive mind, operating as one collective entity. This hive mind coordination allowed them to outthink and outmaneuver the Federation at every turn. The idea of facing an enemy that wasn't driven by individual desires or goals, but by the unified need to consume and destroy, was a concept that the Federation had never encountered before. It was not a war between two civilizations. It was a battle for survival against a force that had no need for compromise, no interest in surrender, and no concept of mercy. The Devourers' way of war was a kind of galactic blight. They didn't just conquer territories or capture planets for their strategic value. They erased everything. Systems they passed through were left as barren wastelands with no resources, no life, no hope. Planets were stripped of all life forms and technology, with every ounce of energy, organic matter, and infrastructure being absorbed into the Devourers' ever-expanding network. The Federation had witnessed the fate of several systems that had fallen victim to this relentless consumption, and each time, the outcome was the same. Nothing remained. The horror of watching entire civilizations, entire worlds, vanish without a trace sent shockwaves through the galactic community. At this point, it became clear to the Federation that the Devourers were not a threat that could be fought through traditional means. Their ability to adapt, the sheer scale of their destruction, and the fact that they seemed to have an inexhaustible desire to consume made them an unparalleled danger. They were a true existential threat, one that did not care for alliances, resources, or diplomacy. All they wanted was to continue their endless march of annihilation. The Federation had no choice but to request assistance, and it was in this moment of desperation that humanity, with its unknown weapon, intervened. What made the Devourers even more terrifying was their ability to bypass the traditional defense mechanisms of galactic societies. For centuries, the Federation and other spacefaring species had developed weapons, shields, and technologies designed to counter other species. But the Devourers didn't operate like any other species. They didn't engage in a battle to conquer. They waged a campaign of total destruction. Their ability to adapt and evolve, to literally consume and integrate the technology of others, meant that conventional tactics were rendered ineffective. They weren't just attacking civilizations. They were erasing them, rendering the entire concept of warfare as it was understood obsolete. When humanity launched their Nanite bomb, it was a game changer. The bomb wasn't just a weapon. It was an act of cosmic defiance against the very nature of the Devourers. In one fell swoop, humanity disrupted the Devourers' momentum, severing their overwhelming advantage of consumption. The bomb's ability to dismantle the Devourer fleet at a molecular level was the Federation's first real victory in what had seemed like an endless conflict. It wasn't just a defeat for the Devourers. It was a message to them that the galaxy would not succumb to their mindless consumption. In conclusion, the Devourers were not just an enemy force. They were a fundamental challenge to the very fabric of galactic existence. Their sheer capacity for destruction, their insatiable hunger for everything they encountered, and their ability to evolve and adapt made them a threat unlike anything the galaxy had ever faced. They didn't just destroy, they erased. The Federation's response was hampered by their inability to understand or counter such a relentless foe. It took humanity's terrifying weapon to turn the tide, revealing just how dire the situation had become and forcing the galaxy to reconsider what it meant to face a truly existential threat. As the Devourers continued their relentless advance across the galaxy, the Federation found itself facing an enemy unlike any they had ever encountered. For centuries, the Federation had been the beacon of hope, peace, and technological advancement, a symbol of unity for countless worlds. But the Devourer's sheer force and overwhelming nature shattered the Federation's sense of invulnerability. In their desperation, the the Federation sought to muster everything they had in defense of their civilizations. Yet all their efforts seemed to be in vain. From the very beginning of the conflict, the Federation underestimated the sheer scale and devastation that the Devourers could bring. Typically, the Federation's military had been formidable, capable of holding off invasions and maintaining peace across thousands of systems. However, the Devourer's strategy of consumption was unlike any form of warfare the Federation had ever encountered. The Devourers didn't seek to claim territory or engage in negotiations. They obliterated everything in their path, assimilating technology, life forms, and entire star systems into their biomechanical hive. As the Devourers began to consume nearby star systems, the Federation's fleet attempted to intervene. They sent their most advanced ships and deployed powerful energy weapons, expecting to halt the advance. The Federation had long relied on a combination of overwhelming firepower and defensive shields, and they had the resources to sustain a prolonged military engagement. But the Devourers' ships were not like anything the Federation had ever faced. The Devourers' vessels, known as Harbingers, were not only heavily armored and resistant to conventional energy weapons, but they also had a self-repairing capacity that allowed them to recover from damage almost instantly. This regenerative capability rendered Federation weaponry largely ineffective, and as the Devourers continued to grow in strength by absorbing the remnants of the Federation's fleet, the situation grew increasingly dire. As each new wave of Devourer ships arrived, they incorporated the Federation's own weapons and defenses into their own systems, learning from the Federation's technology and adapting their strategies in real time. The Devourers weren't just attacking. They were evolving through each engagement, making the Federation's tactics obsolete. This capacity for rapid technological assimilation and adaptation made it clear that no matter how much the Federation threw at the enemy, they would never be able to outgun or outlast the Devourers. Recognizing the futility of conventional warfare, the Federation shifted to a more desperate strategy, a full-scale, all-out offensive aimed at slowing the Devourers' advance and perhaps buying enough time for reinforcements or new tactics to be developed. They rallied their fleet for one final, massive assault against the Devourers' primary fleet, hoping that a concentrated effort could at least stop the immediate threat to the heart of Federation space. The Federation's military leaders pulled out all the stops. They deployed their most advanced weaponry, from experimental energy weapons to destabilizing field generators capable of disrupting the gravitational field of entire planets. Every planet that still resisted the Devourers was fortified, and thousands of soldiers were deployed to defend against the oncoming onslaught. The Federation even called upon its most skilled scientists and engineers to develop new weapons that could counter the Devourers' regenerative technology. However, even with these new resources, the Federation's position was beginning to look increasingly untenable. As the Federation launched its final offensive, the battle was nothing short of apocalyptic. The clash between the Federation fleet and the Devourer Harbingers was so intense that it caused ripples across the galaxy, sending shockwaves that could be felt light years away. Entire fleets were wiped out in a matter of hours, leaving only scattered debris in their wake. Each battle ended the same way, with the Devourers emerging victorious, their ships absorbing the Federation's weapons and reintegrating them into their systems, growing ever more powerful. The Federation's leadership, once united in their mission to preserve peace and uphold justice across the galaxy, began to fracture as the situation grew more desperate. In the face of such overwhelming devastation, dissent began to rise within the ranks. Some factions within the Federation argued that the war should be abandoned altogether. Perhaps peace or submission to the Devourers was the only way to ensure survival. Others, believing that the Federation's spirit could not be broken, insisted on continuing the fight, no matter the cost. The internal division was not just a matter of political ideology, it was a matter of survival. The Federation's strength had always been in its unity, but now that very unity was being tested. Some worlds that were under immediate threat of consumption by the Devourers began to negotiate with the invaders, seeing resistance as futile. These worlds sought to survive by surrendering their sovereignty and resources to the Devourers in the hope of being spared. It was an appalling move for many in the Federation, who saw it as a betrayal of everything they had fought to protect. Even within the military ranks, there was growing frustration and fear. Many soldiers, who had once proudly served under the Federation's banner, began to question the leadership's decisions. How could they continue to fight when it seemed like the Devourers were unstoppable? Many began to fear that they were simply buying time for their own extinction. In the face of total annihilation, the Federation's leadership resolved to take one final, desperate gamble: the deployment of a weapon so powerful, so dangerous, that it had never been used before. This weapon, known as the Nanite Bomb, was the Federation's last hope. Unlike conventional weapons, which relied on destructive force, the Nanite Bomb utilized advanced nanotechnology to break down the molecular structure of the Devourer's ships at a fundamental level. The Nanite Bomb was a risky weapon, one that had never been tested in actual combat. Its potential consequences were unknown. If it failed, it could cause catastrophic collateral damage that might devastate the Federation's remaining fleet or even cause widespread destruction across nearby star systems. Yet, as the Federation's leaders weighed their options, they saw no other choice. The devastation caused by the Devourers could not be allowed to continue, and this weapon, despite its risks, offered the Federation a chance to tip the scales in their favor. The deployment of the Nanite Bomb was nothing short of dramatic. It required the Federation to launch a high-risk mission deep into enemy territory, where the Devourer's main fleet was located. Despite the odds, the Federation's forces managed to deliver the bomb, detonating it within the heart of the Devourer Armada. The results were devastating. The molecular disintegration of the Devourer's ships caused a massive collapse within their fleet, and the technology they had assimilated was rendered useless. For the first time in the war, the Devourers were forced to retreat. While the Federation's use of the Nanite Bomb had temporarily halted the Devourers' advance, the victory came at an immense cost. Many lives were lost in the final assault, and countless ships were destroyed. More importantly, the Federation had no idea how to completely defeat the Devourers. The respite gained by the bomb was only temporary. The Devourers, while wounded, would eventually adapt and evolve once more. The galaxy was no longer at peace, and the Federation was left with the grim realization that they had barely survived the onslaught. In conclusion, the Federation's defense against the Devourers was a tragic tale of desperation, internal strife, and ultimately a Pyrrhic victory. The Federation, for all its power and resources, was unprepared for an enemy that consumed everything in its path. They had underestimated the Devourers, and it was only through humanity's intervention with the Nanite Bomb that they were able to stave off complete annihilation. Yet, even in victory, the Federation was left with the grim understanding that their future, indeed, the future of the galaxy, was uncertain. The Devourers were a force beyond the Federation's control, and their eventual return was inevitable. The Devourers were a terrifying and enigmatic force that emerged from the darkest corners of the galaxy, seemingly unstoppable and relentless in their pursuit of annihilation. Understanding their origin was critical, not just for the Federation's strategic planning, but also for the survival of the galaxy itself. To fully grasp the magnitude of the threat they posed, one had to delve into the mysterious genesis of the Devourers, a creation, an evolution, or perhaps a force of nature, one that transcended conventional understanding. The Devourers were not a new creation. Their origins trace back to an ancient, long-lost species known as the Track. The Track were an advanced civilization, existing in a distant part of the galaxy millions of years before the Federation even began to form. They were an enigmatic race, known for their scientific prowess and mastery over energy manipulation. The Track's technology was incredibly sophisticated, surpassing anything the Federation could imagine at the time of their rise. However, the Track were driven by a singular, destructive ambition, a desire to conquer death itself. The Track civilization was obsessed with the concept of immortality and eternal dominance. They sought to transcend the biological limitations of their own bodies and minds, believing that they could achieve ultimate power by mastering the process of life and death. To do so, they began to experiment with bioengineering and artificial intelligence, merging their own biology with technology in an attempt to create a superior, self-sustaining life form. These experiments eventually led to the birth of the first devourers. The Track-S creations were intended to be the pinnacle of their civilization, beings capable of absorbing and consuming the energy of other life forms, including entire star systems. These biomechanical entities, which became known as the Devourers, were designed to adapt, evolve, and grow stronger with each world they assimilated. Their creators believed they could control these new beings and use them to further their own goals of immortality. But something went horribly wrong. The Devourers, instead of serving their creators, rebelled against the Track, seeing them as weak and inefficient. In time, the Devourers began to consume the very civilization that had birthed them, wiping out the Track in a bloody rebellion that spanned centuries. This event marked the first instance of the Devourers' unstoppable nature. After the fall of the Track, the Devourers continued to evolve on their own, spreading across the galaxy with no clear objective other than to consume and assimilate everything in their path. They were not just destroyers. They were voracious beings designed to consume knowledge, technology, and life itself. The Devourers operated on a biological imperative, their hunger. This hunger drove them to absorb all forms of life, transforming their own biology in the process. Over time, they learned to replicate and adapt the technologies they consumed, making them nearly impossible to defeat. What made the Devourers particularly terrifying was their ability to learn and evolve quickly. As they encountered new species and advanced civilizations, they would incorporate these civilizations' technologies and capabilities into their own biomechanical systems. This assimilation process allowed the Devourers to not only absorb physical resources, but also enhance their own abilities, creating a feedback loop that made them stronger with each world they conquered. This evolution was not just biological, but also technological. The Devourers assimilated energy sources, weaponry, and even advanced computational systems, rapidly advancing their own understanding of the universe. As they continued to consume entire civilizations, the Devourers transformed from mere marauding creatures into an organized, highly efficient hive mind, a collective intelligence that could coordinate their actions across vast distances. Many civilizations that lived on the outer fringes of known space had long whispered about the Devourers, though few knew the true extent of their power. Ancient texts, relics, and folklore depicted them as gods of destruction, creatures that would one day return to consume all life in the galaxy. These stories were considered mere myth by most, written off as the wild tales of primitives or fear-mongering. However, when the Devourers finally returned, those who had studied the ancient records recognized the truth too late. The Federation, in its early years, had dismissed these legends as exaggerated accounts of galactic catastrophes long past. They had no reason to believe that such a threat could resurface in the modern age, especially given the Federation's own technological superiority. It wasn't until the first Devourer fleet arrived on the edges of Federation space that the true scope of the threat became apparent. The galaxy was unprepared, and the Federation's advanced technology, which had once seemed invincible, was ineffective against the Devourers' relentless and ever-evolving onslaught. As the Federation and other galactic powers began to engage the Devourers in conflict, it became increasingly apparent that the Devourers were not just a species with an insatiable hunger for resources. There was something far deeper at play. In the midst of their devastation, certain scholars began to propose that the Devourers might represent an inherent cosmic force, a necessary entity in the natural balance of the universe. The Devourers' hunger, their need to consume, was not random. It was a part of a larger cosmic cycle. Some theories suggested that the Devourers were agents of entropy, sentient beings whose very existence helped maintain the balance between creation and destruction. In this view, the Devourers weren't simply invaders. They were a natural part of the universe's ebb and flow, balancing the proliferation of life and the eventual need for it to be consumed and recycled. This perspective added a layer of complexity to the Federation's fight. If the Devourers were a cosmic necessity, then defeating them might not be an option. Even if the Federation could destroy their fleets and push them back, would the universe itself be destabilized? What would happen if the Devourers were wiped out completely? Would another, even more destructive force take their place? These questions remained unanswered, adding further desperation to the Federation's already dire situation. Today, the Devourers remain a galaxy-wide existential threat. They have evolved beyond their origins as the Track S creations, becoming something more than mere biological entities. The Devourers are now an amalgamation of technology, biology, and a collective intelligence that spans entire star systems. They are no longer simply seeking to consume. They are transforming, evolving, and assimilating at an unprecedented rate. Even with the Federation's most advanced weapons and strategies, there seems to be no way to stop them. The Devourers learn from each encounter, adapting and becoming stronger with each victory. Their resilience is unmatched, and their hunger is endless. The galaxy's greatest hope lies not in defeating the Devourers outright, but in discovering their true purpose, understanding the force behind their existence, and finding a way to coexist, or at the very least survive. In conclusion, the genesis of the Devourers is tied to a long-lost civilization's ambition to achieve immortality, a desire that led to their own downfall and the birth of a cosmic predator. The Devourers are no ordinary invaders. They are a force of nature, driven by an insatiable hunger that transcends mere conquest. Understanding their origin and nature is the key to understanding how the galaxy might survive the coming Dark Age. However, the Devourers' true purpose remains shrouded in mystery, leaving the Federation and all other civilizations in a desperate battle for survival against an unstoppable and ever-evolving enemy.